Who do you believe is literally evil? David Miscavige. The leader of the Church of Scientology. Cult of Scientology. Yeah, how many years has his wife been out of the public eye? 16 years now? It blows my mind as that is public knowledge, but the authorities don't really seem to care because they say she's fine. Nothing shady there. Nope. Edited to convey my thoughts more clearly. I ove that Brooklyn 99 made a joke about this. They had an MLM that was more like a cult with expensive buy-ins, and nobody had seen the wife of the business owner in years, and at their headquarters are big banners saying something like, Debbie Stovelman. I'm happy, healthy, and alive. Lol. Debbie dead. Debbie real dead. I remember when I got a tutor's position at my uni, in Germany, I had to fill out 2 separate forms, among others. One was about whether I was involved in any organizations the Verfassungsschutz, I2A English equivalent, this thing, thanks Gestar342 for the link was watching over, so mostly far right/left and Islamist ones. The other one was like 6 questions about how I'm not a member of Scientology. I didn't attend any Scientology courses, really I'm not affiliated with Scientology and I'm hearing of them for the first time. Just them, because they're that much of a problem. Kenneth Copeland, the mega pastor who looks like a demon wearing a person suit. Nothing about that man seems remotely good and I have no idea how he continues to convince people to hand over millions of dollars. He has the creepiest eyes ever. I don't know how he has any followers when he looks like that. I've been trying to think of others but Copeland keeps coming to mind. That interview where he's asked about his private jet is one of the creepiest recordings ever. Good on the interviewer for not running away from that psycho like I would have. Edit, here's the video. Joel Osteen. Kenneth Copeland. Recently saw that video of him getting asked about his private jet. I am dead certain he was within a hair of putting his hands on that woman, and not for faith healing. You can see him catching himself. What's that scripture about camel through the eye of a needle and rich men not entering the kingdom? I read it long ago, and always think of it when I see rich preachers. He looks evil, too. Seriously, he's freaking terrifying. There are cartoon villains less convincing than he is. If you took the trope deranged preacher who fleeces people's money to the tune of millions while literally being possessed by demons and gave it the most ridiculous interpretation possible, that caricature still wouldn't do Kenneth Copeland justice. Ian Watkins from the band Lost Prophets. I had this guy in my studio long ago. My daughter came to see him perform acoustically when she was maybe 3. Once all this came out I had to purge any images of him with her from existence. Fuck that dude. NSFW. He's how I was exposed to the hurtcore industry. Not only are these monsters greater than buying and conceiving infants and young children for sex slavery, but for snuff films as well. Less than. My answer to Op's question would be one of the ringleaders of these depraved operations. Peter Scully. Edit, spoiler block some excessively disturbing language. We're talking evil. I'm definitely not going to Google that. He's dead now, but Saddam Hussein's eldest son Uday Hussein was one of the most sadistic, cruel, violent and predatory humans in existence. He tortured, sexually abused and murdered countless people out of pure spontaneous rage and bloodthirst. His wiki article is super dark and full of insane stories. Under the section Partying it describes how he'd force his friends to stand against a wall and consume drinks of 90% alcohol and drugs in 10 minutes, and punishment for not doing so involved shaving your eyebrows off, beatings and whippings. Definitely one of those kinds of people who actually deserve to be killed. He was such a crazy psycho that even Saddam wouldn't let him hold power. His second son was the expected heir, and he explicitly told Uday that his brother was off limits and one of the few people he couldn't kill. Aw, that's so sweet. My parents never told my siblings they couldn't kill me. My boss during the Iran-Iraq war was an Iraqi. He told me that Saddam's 20-something-year-old sons were terrible people, worse than their father, and said basically you don't want to know about the older one. Anyone who practices hurtcore. Peter Scully, Ian Watkins, Josh Duggar, that ilk. Literal human mildew in my eyes. I like imagining remorse and redemption arcs for people. I like imagining someone who's committed a heinous crime trying their best to reform and atone for what they've done, even if they know they won't succeed and some will never forgive them, as long as they at least see they've done wrong. This is where I draw the line. I don't care how remorseful or regretful you are. I wish I didn't Google that. After hearing about what kind of stuff was found on Duggar's computer, I can fill in the blanks enough to know that I don't want to know. Till hurtcore exists, and so does a limit for human compassion. You know, with Hitler, the more I learn about that guy, the more I don't care for him. Hitler killed several Jews. You know what? Too many. I'll say it was too many. That Hitler guy was a real jerk. Albert Fish. I guess Putin has to be up there. Just to put this more in context, Putin's job when he was in the KGB was to literally take money into Eastern Europe and fund the most divisive politics and public groups he could find. The Soviet Union did this intentionally to promote violence, lack of unity, and chaos in pro-democratic countries. Notice how, after the fall of communism, absolutely nothing has changed with the Russian approach to global interference? It is estimated Putin has over $200 billion at his disposal, in addition to, a military. He has used every connection over the last 20 years to continue inflaming political division worldwide in an effort to tarnish democracy. Le Pen, the insane racist, fascist French politician, for example, the US elections, Brexit, Italian fascists, just about any fascist movement worldwide. It isn't just Ukraine, it is about anti-democracy, pro-violence for control, pro-fascism. The Cold War never ended, the West just stopped paying attention. Putin is literal evil. Greater than and fund the most divisive politics and public groups he could find. The Soviet Union did this intentionally to promote violence, lack of unity, and chaos in pro-democratic countries. That sounds like it's going on in USA right now. Epstein. You just know. Lol, we don't just know, the evidence is public and at this point completely uncontroversial. This comment reads like saying, I have a bad feeling about this Hitler guy, something about him gives me the willies. I mean, I do have a bad feeling about that Hitler guy. Health insurance denying treatments that your doctors have personally recommended. Health insurance companies insisting that you try other treatments first, or insisting that you work with in-network doctors who can't be seen for 6 to 8 months, intentionally delaying your proper treatment. It's fucking murder as far as I'm concerned. I could keep listing ways that the health insurance industry is pure evil. Its very existence as an industry is evil. Gatekeeping access to healthcare behind extortionate fees is amoral in the extreme. My mother was just diagnosed with a very serious condition that if not treated will make her go blind. Her insurance is refusing to pay for her treatment. She's 73 and will now owe $1,500 used each month so that she doesn't go blind despite having Medicare. This is our system. The Sackler family. Richard Sackler specifically would be the more correct answer in my opinion. The rest of them are greedy and borderline sociopathic, sure, but I think few of them truly understood the ramifications of what Richard was orchestrating. Richard intentionally orchestrated the opioid epidemic and he knew exactly what he was doing and what the outcome would be. He banked the future of his company on creating a legion of opiate addicts that had no idea they were becoming opiate addicts. That is evil. I am a victim of this fucker. Slipped a disc and was prescribed OxyContin 240 mg a day. Within 6 months I was up to 80 mg 3 times a day. That's the equivalent of 48 5 mg Percocet. I'm still struggling and this happened in the late 90s. I knew a guy who retired from an investment firm before he was 40. I inquired if I could get a job at the firm. He told me if you can look a woman in the eyes, who scrubbed floors all her life, and tell her that you can quadruple her life savings by investing in a stock you know is worthless, then you could work there. I felt sleazy just listening to him. I lost all respect for him. He preyed on poor desperate people, and ruined their lives, so he could retire in his 30s. I found out from a friend that the investment firm was a boiler room fly-by-night scam. Everyone who worked there was taken out in handcuffs. A lot of these types preying on poor/vulnerable/uneducated people are alarmingly evil. You can tell just from the way they look at and talk about these people, as if they are the absolute scum of the earth and deserve to be poor/disabled. And this kind of mentality is far more prevalent than it should be. That's literally what the Wolf of Wall Street did. Sadly, he is glorified by some in our society and it is sick. He was a celebrated speaker at a youth conservative conference thing in Houston pretty recently. I heard about it on the radio and did a double take. Then they said the event was sponsored by Dan Crenshaw, so then I was less shocked. Gertrude Banishevsky, the caregiver of Sylvia Likens. Her story still gives me chills. I barely made it through that story. It was so horrendous. And our fucking legal system did barely anything to the heinous bitch Gertrude and her evil daughter. And there were so many opportunities for Sylvia Likens to be saved. It's really sad. Greater than Paula was found guilty of second-degree murder and was released in 1972. Hobbs, Hubbard, and John were found guilty of manslaughter and served less than 2 years in the Indiana Reformatory before being granted parole on February 27, 1968. What the F? Ted Bundy. I still find it insane that the judge, who heard all the evidence against him and the cruel and evil things he did to countless women, told him after his sentencing that he could have become a great lawyer, if he'd just gone another way. Bundy was a deranged bastard, and he still managed to charm the judge after being a complete narcissist psycho in the courtroom. The judge was right though, lol. He would have been a fantastic lawyer. That's not necessarily a compliment. The traits that make a good lawyer can be used for good, but are horrible traits in a vacuum. Kenneth Copeland, ironically an evangelist. Any prosperity preacher, whether on TV or not, goes back to radio days. If you give enough money to God, He will perform miracles for you. By God, of course, they mean themselves, taking money from poor people by using their ignorance. Selling false hope for money. Sickening. Anyone on the boardroom of a cable news company in America. You look outside and you see our society on the brink of collapse, and yet you choose to present this as what's important to Americans? Infotainment and consolidation need to go. We need more voices, and some of those have to be antagonistic to your sponsors. 2. We need a fairness doctrine 2.0. But my side's cable news company is saving democracy by letting me know whom to hate. As an Australian, something that I found really jarring was how many American news shows had the presenter tell the viewer what to think and how to feel about the events they presented. While we do have a few shows that can be like that in Australia, they're certainly not the norm, and it isn't hard to find a news or current affairs program that presents the facts of a situation without being accompanied by self-righteous exposition. None of our news programs are like that, for example, except maybe The Project. But watching American programs over a few different networks, where the host actively tells you how to feel about it, whether presenting a politically left or right view, it ceased to be a mystery to me why so many Americans struggle with critical thought. Pol Pot. He single-handedly made the life expectancy in Cambodia drop from like 80 or something normal to 18 years. He was also a hypocrite in who was to be purged, as he had all of those traits earlier. After my breakup with my fiancée, a friend told me to join her in Cambodia. She's fallen in love with it and has helped build a school with the friends we made. I walked with her through the killing fields. She had the audio and I just read on the boards where you go through. She was breaking down in tears and I was just trying to mind consume what the fuck. She later explained to me the other parts of Pol Pot. That man was, I can't even compare him to someone. The whole levels of hierarchy. If you moved up and pissed someone off, you were killed. You wore glasses, you were killed. Just walking through knowing that this is where mass of the deaths came from. Just that area, and the pool of water that they clean and the lake behind it every year because bones and teeth float up. And then the sunken grass from where bodies were piled. Fuck SMH. Jesus Christ. It sounds like hell on earth. I hope nobody ever does anything like it again. In 1969 the life expectancy in Cambodia was 46 and it dropped to 14 in 1978. NSFL. The articles are safe, the content however is atrocious. Peter Scully ran a child snuff film production company out of the Philippines and inspired a few copycats to engage in the hardcore snuff industry. A 60 Minutes Australia interview with him. A copycat. In reality, he was a member of several virtual communities of abusers on the dark web, distributing images on so-called hardcore websites, where images of violent sexual and physical abuse are shared, and where he had a membership level of rapist. Another copycat, Scully, is mentioned again. They asked Graham to unlock his laptop. He refused, but he willingly handed over his phone and passcode. Big mistake. Cached on it were 3 images he didn't even know were there, greater than 2, of dead children and one of a baby being stood on. Less than. Edit. I've been advised to spoiler the last sentence as it is disturbing. However, it is in the article as well. In all honesty, I would refuse to watch those videos if I was a juror. I would walk the hell out. You could put me in jail, I don't care. I understand the importance of a fair trial, but being made to watch babies being tortured is unfathomable. How TF did I miss this? I'm Filipino and this should have been all over the news. WTF. I have no idea. National story in Australia, so I can only assume the Philippines didn't report on it at a level that would disturb the populace. Philippines has a history of traffickers taking their operations there. He is alleged to have run a lucrative business involving clients paying the equivalent of between $100 and $10,000 in a pay-per-view scheme to watch videos, some of which have been described as the most shocking seen by Philippines agents fighting human trafficking. His most profitable tape was a source of urban legend on the dark web until it was proven. $10,000 per copy. There are 75 victims connected to him and multiple copycats. I'm surprised more people didn't already know about him. Any animal abuser ever. I don't tolerate animal cruelty, ever. It's the purest form of evil, just like child abuse. I am a vet tech student and I have seen a few cases of animal abuse in varying forms. However, one has stuck with me. We were called by an owner who wanted a checkup for their dog, but he told us he wanted to stay in the waiting area. We thought that maybe he had a phobia of needles or other medical things. A few days later I am doing some laboratory work and one of the vets asks me to come with her as she needed help with the dog of the owner who didn't want to come in. I walk in and this dog is emaciated, had mats all over his body and we can't even see his eyes. The dog is scared as hell as he can't see anything, so I held him, to prevent him from biting, and 2 vets shaved him. Behind the mats of fur we find one very infected eye, and a hole where the other eye should have been. We told the owner that he had 3 choices. 1. Come back with the dog for the next week to get treatment for the infections and the rest, and also take him to a groomer. 2. Euthanize. 3. Don't come back and we call the police. He chose the second option, but refused to stay in the room while it happened. I kept quiet as I don't want to lose an internship. Luckily, the vet got angry and told him to at the very least comfort the dog while he was euthanized. Luckily he did. The next week he showed up with a Chihuahua/Pomeranian mix puppy. There's a reason we root for John Wick. Henry Kissinger. Once you've been to Cambodia you will never tire of beating Henry Kissinger to death with your bare hands. In case people don't know, he is basically a war criminal who has continued to be free and to profit off of his unrepentant disregard for human life and dignity. Now runs a think tank that supports evil regimes around the world. I assume he is still alive because whatever Faustian bargain he made is not complete. He turns 100 in a few days. The Economist interviewed him yesterday. Nobody saying Rupert Murdoch? Pedophiles, specifically the ones caught with sexually explicit images of children under 3. Deleted. But if you read the Keet zur Schulchen Aru, the chapter that describes the laws of sex include that raping a child under the age of 2 doesn't count because they can't talk yet, so they cannot tell anyone. I read that when I was 12. It was my first exposure to sex education. The Sackville Baggins. After all reading all of these other horrific posts, this was a nice thing to come across. Lotho, anyway, Lobelia gained her redemption when she clocked Sorman's lackey with her umbrella, in defense of the Shire. People who abuse children. Nestle. I watched some YouTube doc about a popular furry dude who was robustly accused of sexually and physically assaulting his dog and other, can't remember the name. Terrible pos. The posts that were linked to him about said acts were chilling. Was it Caro? The guys he was enthusing about it with were 10x worse. I don't even want to type out the things they bragged about doing. I have no idea how his channel is still up. What a piece of garbage. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. The tape recording of one of their young victims crying for her mum while being tortured is awful. They refused to say where they buried Keith Bennett and that boy's poor mum died without knowing where he was. I hope they are forever being tortured in hell. I'm glad they kept Ian Brady alive and suffering as long as they possibly could. There's a rather detailed description on Wikipedia, I think, of his only wish being to die, and him being kept alive for years in prison with increasingly declining health. It's the sort of thing where you know it was personal. Joel Osteen and preacher Kenneth Copeland and every single pastor who operates a megachurch. Please note that I am not saying religion is evil, I am saying the people who abuse people's beliefs to gain wealth. Osteen blocked me on Twitter when I asked how he sleeps at night knowing how his flock sometimes chooses between buying prescriptions and buying food so they can send him money to fund a new private jet. Scientologists. I one time has a Scientologist in a laundromat in the middle of the night come up to me to complain about the HBO documentary, and he literally said, "They said we can't leave, but I can leave anytime I want to." Cults and intense religion does stuff to the brain. Church cults in general, People's Temple, Heaven's Gate, etc. My uncle fell into one of these cults and it ruined him and his family for a long time. My cousins had to be given free lunches by neighbors, school, my grandparents and our aunt/my family. All they would eat is bread and if they're very lucky, oatmeal. Aunt and uncle gave away almost all their money to the cult. It took a lot of convincing for them to stop. My cousins turned out relatively okay for themselves, but I know it affected them quite a bit to this day. Edit. I wasn't expecting this comment to blow up so much, but I was asked what cult the family was in. The cult was called Worldwide Church of God. They were a part of this cult during the early 80s, before I was born. The church was strict on rules of what to eat, how much money given to the church, marriage, etc. Hence the concern for my family. It came to a head with my dad setting a boundary with his brother saying you can't meet my kids until you and your family escape. Which hurt my dad's family a lot, but my aunt and my grandpa agreed it had to be done. I didn't meet my uncle, his wife or cousins until I was 7 years old. My uncle, aunt and 2 out of the 3 of my cousins are doing relatively okay for themselves. I personally believe churches are supposed to be there for the community, not prey and restrict people, hence my distaste and thoughts of church cults as evil.